when we go in and do succession planning for companies, we look at doing the valuation, then we look at the people. Primarily, mom and dad are looking at transitioning the stock to the next generation, and you might have one child in there that's really, really capable. You might have one that's very, lazy. You might have one that's chemically addicted. I mean, you can have all sorts of different things going on in there. But a lot of times you'll have somebody that is really capable, but they're young. And they need 5 years or so of development in order to be ready for a CEO position. And if you throw them into that role too fast, you can have real problems. Tell me a little bit about what kind of symptoms. If you're an owner, you're running a company today, you think you've got your kids in a good position to be able to take over, what would be some of the symptoms that you'd see that says, we've got to get them outside counsel? Maybe they've been counseled by dad and mom, and their worldview on running businesses is very narrow. What are some of the things that you'd see that if a father or mother that owns and runs a company is listening, that would be a clear sign that it's time to get some outside help?
That was a complex question. When you start with that question, talking about the difference between the preparedness of those individual kids to step up, there's really no substitute for self-awareness. And some people have
on their part or the parents' part?
Both. But it usually starts with the parents. And the parents are going to have to be tough enough to recognize who's ready to step into that kind of role. And, parenting isn't always, sometimes there is tough love. And the ultimate goal here and the success for all those kids is that the company do well. And so having the wisdom and the backbone to make that call is really essential.
Well, Kim, I got to tell you, I see more often than I want to see parents that have a level of blinders on about whether Junior is capable of really becoming the CEO. They love the child. They want the best for the child. But, we've got questionnaires. I could talk about some of the things that we do to get to the bottom of what's going on. But I see a lot of parents that aren't very self-aware as to what kind of a situation they really have. So part of my job is to say, time out. Here are the 10 things that we need to have in a CEO for the next generation, and you got 5. Sometimes it gets me fired because the parents just don't want to hear. And I'm not saying I am 100% right on everything I do. My assessment could be wrong. But more often than not, when we start asking good questions, and I could give you an example of what some of those are, I find parents are not very self-aware. That's why I asked you the question, what kind of symptoms would you see? And, for me, it's like, how well does the I call him a child, I hate to do that, young adult, how well do they understand finances and the financial statements and how you should be dealing with payables and receivables and managing sales and marketing and making sure that your accounting staff is on top of things? If they're out of their league there, that's kind of a problem. The other thing is do they present themselves well as an adult? Could they walk into the banks and get $1 million loan to help finance the expansion of the warehouse? Do the senior leadership that are 50 plus that got 10 more years to work, sometimes they only have 5 more years to work, do they respect the child? Those sorts of things kind of jump out at me. And if I don't see that happening, but I believe the young successor has a good heart and a real desire to grow and expand their wisdom and knowledge, they got to get outside help to do it.
Well, what you're really talking about for part of that, Dave, is executive presence. And one of the things we do in working with clients is to take a look at, do they have that executive presence, which you're talking about? And many times they're going to be younger than some of the people they're supervising that have been there quite a while. And so credibility is a big issue. And there's some very strategic things you can do to improve the likelihood of that credibility. And then there's also some things you need to really avoid because it's going to absolutely shoot you in the foot with that stuff. A couple things, though, I would, when you were talking, it pinged a couple things for me. When that transition happens, the parent, obviously, and built the business, is going to make a lot of calls. But they can also be instrumental in helping that transition be more or less successful in terms of what they do to facilitate that transition and build the credibility of that handoff. But you're seldom going to have anybody, certainly wasn't me when I went into my role as a CEO, you're seldom going to have anybody that's 10 out of 10 on all 8 things that is really important,
Yeah.
That's why I came back and said, but self-awareness is critical, because what you want to do is to make sure that you're bringing people in either to as employees or as outside consultants that are phenomenal in your weakest areas.